Jingle, jingle. Welcome to the Blonde Conversation.
Unfiltered.
Disclaimer.
There's plenty of swearing in this one.
Yeah, sorry. I apologise.
Yeah, Lauren.
At some point, we'll film an intro.
We'll film an intro.
Today. Well, we're filming a podcast right now.
You know? I thought we were only using the audio.
We're going on YouTube, babe. That's why I did my makeup. Anyway, at some point, I'll be like, hi, I'm Lauren and I'm Jacqueline. This is the Blonde's Conversation. Why, me. Not today. Today, you just get us. Feral is the word I used earlier. That's what I want to be. Feral. Anyway, let's get started so these poor people don't have to listen for too long. Hello.
Hi.
Welcome.
Yeah,
to
welcome
today. We had a conversation the other day that has prompted me to think of a question. So my question for you, I wish I had a microphone. I could be like, bam, bam, bam. This afternoon, mother, is what's your best boss story? As in, what's your best bad boss story? Or the one that comes to your mind first when I'm like, what's your worst experience with a boss? And I'll explain why.
So disclaimer, I'm not going to do worst stories, but I will do a story.
We'll get to worst stories in a later podcast episode once I've peeled back the layers of Jaqualin.
Just a story that pops in my head about kind of understanding. Bearing in mind that one of the things that I do is about leadership. It's about understanding. Leadership's about listening.
Mum does a lot of training helping people be better leaders through empathy and humanness and connection and all those kinds of
self-regulation, self-awareness.
Everything that is restoration, but for leaders. Like that's a lot of what you do.
It is.
Sorry, just to explain how she works.
And I
love
love it. I absolutely love it.
She's really good at it.
I think it's brilliant.
If you've ever worked with her in a training room, you'll know that. Sorry.
Thank you. So this experience for me really kind of challenges that whole thing about understanding. So I can remember having gone to a meeting once, and I just, sometimes some subjects, I'm a big believer in you learning layers. So there's times where you'll be sat listening to something and so much of it goes in, and then the next time that you hear it again, it goes in a bit more, and then it might be said in a little bit of a different way, and it's like, oh, I get it now. So for me, I've learned that, and having been in the training room and delivered training for over a decade, that really struck me about watching people who would come back, refreshing their training and they'd understand it more and more, and they'd have to go and practice things. And there's a really gorgeous little saying that I love, which is, tell me, show me, let me try, watch me, praise me, see me fly. Yeah. And that repetitiveness of sometimes you've got to come back to the tell me, show me, let me try, watch me. I
mean, that makes sense. We're literally taught to revise from being like kids. Yeah. Like how you can't be taught something once and be expected to know it.
No, and so this little, and it's funny, isn't it? Because the reason why it's this story that just sticks with me is because of it is about how I felt after I heard what was said to me. So I can remember having a private conversation outside of the training room with another colleague and saying, oh my word, I really get it now. Like, oh, I don't know what it is, but whatever's just been said today, that bit's just really hit me. Yeah. I get it. What I didn't know was my manager was stood behind me, or a manager was stood behind me and said, what do you mean that you get it now? And literally just paused. And the dread that I felt that I'd got it wrong.
As if anything other than a celebration at that point it was needed.
And literally the words that were said to me next were, you should have known that. Oh. You've been in this role long enough now. And I hadn't been in the role very long. When I look back, I should have known it. And that, just even that feeling of like I was useless. And also what it did for me was shut me down. Yeah. So at that point now it's like, I'm not going to share. Which, if you know me, you know that doesn't often happen.
Yeah, that doesn't.
I tend to think.
Welcome to our podcast.
Yes. So yeah, that was that one for me. I think is one of the ones I'm happy to share, and also that really sticks with me.
Yeah.
Just this feeling of dread that I was, oh my word, I can't believe I've just embarrassed myself in front of this person.
Yeah, the shame of like, oh my God, why didn't I know that?
It was the shame. Yeah. It was the shame. And also that the thing I know about shame is that I internalised that and personalised it. So there was something wrong with me because I'd only just learnt it. Whereas, I mean, like, I need sometimes to read the same page 5 times. Never mind learn something, because actually I need it to go in and I think
sometimes we
that's
just need
beauty.
to hear it from someone different.
Yeah.
And that drives me crazy, especially if it's my husband and I've said something a million times and then someone else says it and he goes, "Oh, this is amazing," and I'm like, "I've been saying that for years, but it's okay."
But that's true. That's the
that is
truth.
what it is.
It is that.
It just needs to be said
People
by
will
someone different.
sometimes say it in a particular way that just resonates with you.
Or maybe you're just in a specific moment.
That's it.
Maybe you're just more open to it on
Yep.
that day that they say it. Maybe it's that you've all of a sudden had this other experience that you can finally relate to it. There's loads of different ways.
That
what
not
a
feeling
dick. Sorry.
great was that. Yeah, and enough that because that's years ago, and it really just.
Well,
stuck
I
with me.
hope she burned her tongue on a tea.
What about you?
Petty is my way forward. So the one that came up for me when I was thinking about it, was back when I was like 18 years old, baby Lauren, and I was working. I was a manager. I was really young and I really loved my job, but I was suffering with what I now know is endometriosis. But I was like still in the stage where I was like trying to figure it all out, and I was in for a laparoscopy, and like you came to stay because you were staying at mine on your way to travel to Ireland, and I remember I got really poorly, so I couldn't swallow. It was tonsillitis was what it was, but it was really bad, and I went to the hospital the next day, and they were like, "Look, we can't do this surgery because you're too poorly for it. It won't go well." And I was devastated. I was absolutely devastated because I wanted answers for one thing. So I was going through all of this. I then, hadn't been through the surgery and I'd only booked one day off, which in itself is wild, but I'd booked one day off to have a laparoscopy and then my plan was to go back to work the next day. And I rang my boss and was like, right, okay, so not only can I not come in today because even though I've not had it done, I can't come in because I'm poorly, I'm also going to need the weekend off because I'm really poorly. And they were such a dick to me and belittled me so hard that I went back into work the next day. I went back in with this tonsillitis and I couldn't talk, and I ended up being sick all week from it because I was just so poorly. And I remember being laid on the floor, just being so devastating and upset. But I was the reason. So before I move on and tell you the reason, actually, this is where I want to officially stop and pause and ask the listeners: tell us your tea. I want to hear your best, worst boss stories. Best worst boss stories. Well, everybody's got one. Everybody's got a story about a boss who's a see you next Tuesday. That one I can't say online. I can't bring myself to say that one.
No,
I feel like we might get boycotted.
Not my favourite word.
Not your favourite. Even though I keep embroidering it on things for you.
You do.
But yes, I want you. So come and tell us them in the comments or on Instagram or wherever you find us. Tell us your best boss stories. But the reason I wanted to ask that is because
can I just say? And it's okay to keep them anonymous.
Yes.
Don't add any.
Please don't name your boss in them.
This is not about naming. Because for me, understanding. Can I just say about my situation? I realised that was about learning. That when people behave in a certain way, there needs to be more knowledge and more learning. That's it. So I understand that. Yeah. It just wasn't great being on the receiving end. So,
we're going to validate your feelings while accepting that the people who are doing the things need to learn. Yeah. So the reason that I've thought this though is because we had a conversation the other day, or maybe you sent me a reel. I don't know. It could be anything. The way that we work. I don't know if the listeners can hear your belly. Stomach. If you didn't know, I've got celiac disease, and the podcast will tell you all about it. Is that there is no way you would ever speak to anyone, like an employee or a friend or anyone, the way you speak to yourself in your head.
So what you're saying is that as bad as those situations were,
I absolutely believe realised, the voices in our heads are meaner.
Yeah,
and hopefully once we start working on them, and even recognizing them, it gets a little bit easier. But one of the things that, back when we first started this, Mum is a PQ coach, so she's part of the positive intelligence. There's a way that I'm supposed to word that community. That means that she's the community, because that's what one of the things is that we can offer, isn't it? But back when we started positive intelligence, one of the things they talk about is the judge, isn't it? And a lot of people have this in different ways. So you might know it as the inner critic, or some people call it, is it chimpanzee on your shoulder or something?
Oh, having the chimp that runs wild.
Yeah,
That's more to do with the emotions and not being a Charlie's running wild.
This is why I'm not a coach, right?
It is not.
But no, but I mean, like, as in, I don't know what they all are. But we started to talk about the judge and the inner critic, and that first moment, I remember being sat on your living room floor, and we were talking about, I don't even know what we were talking about, and you were like, "But what's like?" Listen to what's happening in your head when you say that out loud. Like, what's happening? And all of a sudden hearing that voice and how mean it was. And that wasn't my boss. That wasn't it wasn't somebody like in the street. It wasn't anything. It was my voice in my head that was being meaner to me than anyone else. And like, for me, I wanted to talk about it on this because it's like, how many of us exist with that and think it's us? Okay, so here's a random one that I wrote an email about earlier. When we first moved to our new system, I wrote a newsletter for the blondes. And I addressed it to myself.
Everyone was called Lauren.
Everyone was Lauren because I chose user first name instead of contact first name. And I just hadn't picked up on it. You know, it was just a silly mistake. But I literally called everybody Lauren. And we were getting emails back like, "Hi, I'm not Lauren."
We did.
And, you know, and it's just such a stupid mistake. And it doesn't mean anything. And it's not a big deal. But the voice in my head was like, "You effing idiot. Like, what stupid, this is why you shouldn't be doing this job. This is why you should go back and get a normal job. Like, you can't run your own business. You can't even send a newsletter." It was so mean and it was so cruel. And that's like the example. But because that happened a little bit later where we'd started doing the work, I was like, "Oh, that's my judge." She's actually called Mary. Don't know why, but that's the name that was in my head when we first did it all those years ago. And it's a little old lady who's mean to me. And yeah, that's what our conversation made me think about, was the fact that how many of us have these voices in our head that are so mean. And we think that, you know, people around us are mean, but actually...
You know, it's interesting as you were talking there, because what struck me is that when we do have a loud inner critic or judge, which you're right, positive intelligence that we talk about, a judge and the saboteurs, and we could talk a bit more about that. When we have a loud judge, I think we're far more likely to take somebody else's judgment.
Yeah.
So we allow it because
ours joins in.
Yeah. Because we're so hard on ourselves. Because
Yeah.
you know, if you think about that, it's like you were putting yourself down so much there. The chances are that wasn't just happening at that point; it had been happening from being much younger. So if anybody, you know, if you think about 18-year-old you who wasn't able at that point to advocate for herself and say,
Yeah.
"I can see that this isn't okay for you. I need this time off."
Yeah.
You know, so we take it.
Yeah.
And we take it because we take it from ourselves. And you're right, what we do and say to ourselves is much worse.
Yeah.
Than what even what we would do and say to a friend.
Yeah, gosh.
You know, the meanness and the, you know, and the it is the criticism.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because, you know, we often talk about it as being sabotage. And what I have loved is this shift in thinking that rather than it being sabotage, it's protection. Because, you know, little Lauren didn't like making mistakes. You don't like making mistakes. Well, the one way to stop you from making a mistake, your brain believes, is if it shames you, you'll stop doing it.
Yeah.
So it's to protect you. And it's not a great protector.
No.
On the other end of it, I don't know about you, but you shame me, I'm not likely to do my best work.
No, I'm a bit of a rebellious little
yeah.
bitch, actually.
So it's that, isn't it? So I think we all... Right, I just want to kind of say something, though, because I really think it's interesting, because I've for a very long time talked about the monologue that's in my head. It's not even a monologue, it's a full-on conversation, because I do believe there are different parts of me in there. And Lauren, you've spoken about
mine's
that.
an AA meeting.
AA meeting.
And it's just all different Laurens chatting away to themselves, and they won't shut the fuck up.
Yeah. And some people don't have that.
No, I know, which is crazy. My husband...
It's unfair.
It's fucking wild. My husband, God rest his soul, he's not dead. He's just
I was about to say, God rest his soul.
he's not dead. He's just we pray for him because he's my husband. I said I remember saying to him once something about how loud like the brain was, and something about the amount of like stuff that goes on in the brain, and he like looked at me like I was crazy, and I was like, what? And he was like, what do you mean? And I said, I'm just going to say what happens in my brain out loud for the next couple of minutes. And like it was wild because it was just a constant stream of consciousness, like chatting, chat. And I wasn't even doing anything. I think I was making a cup of coffee, and I was like, oh, but I know I need to clean the extractor fan, and I can see that needs cleaning. And once I thought about that, I was like, oh, there's still a sticker on that cupboard. And once I saw the sticker on the cupboard, I was like, oh, Arlo's shoes need cleaning. And it was this constant do 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 do. And he stood there looking at me like, you crazy, you crazy. And I was like, what happens in your head when you think to yourself, what do you want for dinner? And he was like, it goes, what do you want for dinner? And I was like, what do you mean? What do you mean that's what it says? Because mine goes, I go, what do you want for dinner? And a part of my brain goes, you want to be skinny. And another part goes, no, you don't. And another part's like, well, we really fancy pizza. And another part's like, you can't have pizza because you're celiac. And another part's like, we're not celiac. Nobody can prove anything. And then there's another part that's like, oh, we've got the documents. And it's like this, I really meant it like an AA meeting that goes round and round in my head. And then on the outside, Dave's like, what do you want? And I go, I don't know. And he thinks I'm being annoying. But it's because the conversation's still going.
Too many choices now. Who am I supposed to listen to?
So many. But yeah.
And the sad part is that we do listen to the mean ones.
Yeah, they're louder though, aren't they? They're louder.
Initially.
Yeah.
You can change
We are
that.
learning to slow them down.
Well, that there's lots of ways to be able to do that. Self-compassion is a huge one.
That's changed everything.
Yeah, it's interesting because I know we didn't maybe think about that as a topic today. I think that isn't possibly an interesting conversation to have about that, because I think alongside
we're just moving,
positive intelligence and what we know about that, and the fact that you can begin to really capture where are your thoughts coming from, by tuning into them, understanding what the feelings are around that, and feelings such as worry and dread and fear and anxiety and that.
And the idea that our thoughts happen without our control and that we just have to allow them to happen. But actually, they happen a certain way because of habit. And we can learn to, hang on. Wait, don't go that way.
It's like, I think...
Go this way.
Well, with anything like that, it's always about self-awareness, isn't
you can shift it.
And
self-awareness.
One of the biggest things in... yeah, it's a bit. One of the things that you learn, one is that you're not your thoughts. They may happen, but you don't have to believe them.
They don't have to be true.
Absolutely
crazy.
Who knew?
Yeah.
Who knew that my brain wasn't telling me
for that? Thank God.
The other is that it is about intercepting them and then being able to and take a moment and take a pause, and I guess that's where, because I'd love to talk to you a little bit about self-compassion, because you just described a situation there where the reality is it was a newsletter, and if we talk about the fact that actually as business owners we are going to fail a lot, have failed and
like more, because it's interesting that like this is where perspectives are changing, isn't it? Because the more we're learning, the more I'm looking forward to failing. Because every time we fail, we learn something new and it gets better. Like, so I think I shared or I'm about to share a post, I don't know, that talks about the fact that, if you're procrastinating, that's what it was talking about. It was talking about the two reasons that I see for procrastination are, number one, you're a perfectionist. So you're scared to start because you're scared it'll be shit. Or number two, you've got too much to do, so you don't know where to start. So you procrastinate. You just avoid it altogether. So they're the two that I would suggest.
Both linked to emotions.
Right.
But you just mentioned scared, overwhelmed is too many emotions, don't have.
Yeah. So then there's that like that perfectionism, and I've completely lost the point of what I was saying.
So the whole fact that we are going to fail more, and that you're enjoying the fact that we're failing more.
Yeah. So the way to overcome that, perfectionism of, so I never used to want to colour in my colouring books, because if I finished it and it was shit, I'd be so disappointed in myself. So I'd leave my colouring books empty. because actually colouring them in was scarier than not colouring them in. Like, I remember that as a kid. And, you know, ripping pages out and throwing them away.
There's some part
But that's
of me
still
that's
now.
like,
How many notebooks do people have sat on the side that they don't want to write in? Because, looking at you, Jaqualin, right? Also, just a side note, we call her J Qualin because of that reel that came out one where it's like Aaron. And if you know what that is, you're my people. Welcome. So that's just a little side note. But how many people have notebooks that are really pretty and they don't write in because they're like, oh, I don't know, I don't have anything important enough to write in them. You don't do that anymore.
No, I don't do that. I never did that. It's just that I like covers. So I just buy lots of notebooks and then write.
I think there's a lot of us who have these notebooks that just sit on the side, and we do, you know, we save them for when we're going to write something important in them. As we're all going to write novels.
Even listening to you, Lauren, it's that whole bit, isn't it? One of the things that I think we've both recognised, and I'm probably a bit further down the road of letting it go, is perfectionism.
Yeah.
And, you know, I still have that show up in certain ways. So mine will often show up in the way that I look. I won't leave the house unless I'm happy with the way that I look because I worry about what people think about me. You know, my clothes have been a big part of me.
Yeah.
And actually I'm letting that go because I'm just like, oh, whatever. Think what you want of me. It doesn't really matter. And actually that's because I think less critically of me. I don't need to be a certain way to be worthy, and I don't think that. I do know that I matter, you know, and that my self-worth isn't connected to anything that's external. I just am worthy, and actually it says more to me about you if you're really judgmental of what I look like. And
because if you're judgmental of what I look like, it means you're judgmental of what you look like.
Exactly that.
It's that like, oh, that must be really hard for you to always hate yourself.
Yeah, and
like, oh.
I hope this is okay to share because I know that you, Lauren pulled a real face there. I know that you said to me before that, you know, and you used a word on a previous podcast where we were talking about expectations, that you've had these really high expectations for yourself. And actually what happens then is you have these high expectations of other people.
Yeah.
And that's caused quite a lot of angst for you and angst for them because you feel that things need to be done a particular way, and you know,
it shows up massively for me as a controlling thing.
Exactly. And it's
a safety thing, isn't it?
Of course it's a safety thing. There's the protection.
Because it's like, well, if I do it better, then I'm just going to do it.
Yeah. And I'll be accepted and I'll be loved and lots because that's what we're looking for.
Without realising.
Yeah, without realising that's it. But if you think about as a human being, we want connection. We want to feel like we matter to other people.
Yeah.
Because we're social creatures. That's what we are. Of course it is. And so we'll do anything to fit in. And part of that for me is perfectionism because, you know, actually, will you have me? I know I heard that was a very loud belly rumble. You know, will you accept me? Let me just show you how good I am. I can do it better. So there's a lot of emotions about being scared, about not being good enough, all of that kind of stuff that's behind it. And actually that was some of the stuff because I guess when we first started working together, this has been the biggest discovery journey for both of us where, you know, actually, and I guess this is more at the moment sitting with you because of what you've just shared, but me recognising how hard that was for you to not do 100%. Everything had to be perfect. It was like, this is the way that I work. And obviously we needed to appreciate these very, you know, what felt like big differences between us in the way that we showed up and how, you know, what we needed from each other and what mattered. And we've really worked on that. And still, there was these really high expectations that you know, for you, they became a bit of a blocker because if it wasn't perfect, you would make it perfect, which meant that you would go above and beyond. So when we were talking earlier,
that'd be exhausting.
And actually this is a really interesting one to connect to some of the other podcasts that we've done, because when we're talking about the rest, you know, we would be talking about the fact that we were only going to work so many hours, and then we'd be in a conversation, and you still do it now, where you'll say to me, well, I was working on that last night and I stayed up and I did blah and I did blah, 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 blah. And in the back of my head, I am thinking,
in fairness, it's because I love what I do.
Yeah.
It is what I love what I do.
Yeah,
like,
absolutely.
I don't do the boring stuff. When I stay up late at night time, it's not like, I think that's the difference is when we first started, I was using this business as a stick to beat myself with.
Yeah, you were.
Like, it was like, well, do you know what it was? And it's coming back to that thing I'm sure that we'll talk about on a different podcast about, I was proving my ego right by proving that I was shit, which is such a roundabout way of doing it. But I was getting like a little hit from the fact that I could prove myself right, that I was failing. So then I was like beating myself with a stick on being like, well, and bearing in mind when we started this business, I literally had a newborn baby and I was coming out of what was a horrendous pregnancy, like life-threateningly horrendous pregnancy, and a lot of other family stuff going on, like life-changing stuff for us. And I was not living in a safe place, and there was just all of this other stuff. And yet what I was beating myself up with was the fact that, I hadn't posted on social media, or that I didn't know how I was doing X, Y, or Z, or that we hadn't earned enough money yet. And, and those were the things I was beating myself with. And I think that's where it's changed now. And God, we're really good at tangents, because the point of the post that I'm putting out this week is about making the aim to make mistakes. Because then there's something really fun about it, right? Because when we're terrified of mistakes, we don't move forward at all, because we procrastinate. We do that thing where, if anyone's listening to this who's worked with me, you'll know that I know who you fucking are, who, things have got to be perfect before you want to put them out into the world, because you're like, but that's the protection.
All right.
I wasn't actually talking to you, but it is that. It's that, like,
yeah.
Because I think that there's a comfort. So let's say that you've got an offer to put out, right? Let's say you're a coach and you're about to go out and you're going to go, right, okay, I want to get clients in. If you haven't put the offer out yet, there's a comfort in knowing that you don't have clients because the offer's not out. Because it's not perfect yet. But if you put the offer out before it's perfect and you don't get clients, then it's your fault because the offer wasn't perfect. So you're protecting yourself from having to take responsibility for that. But that's not how this works. Like, we've got to push and just be like, I'm just going to go and do it and see how it goes, and then learn from it.
Then the louder your critic is in your head, the louder that, actually is it telling you that you're rubbish and that you're not good at certain things. Bear in mind that no one's good at certain things when they first start out.
Literally.
Nobody.
I literally said that on Threads today.
Just so you know, I think we're on episode 5. I'm really looking forward to getting to episode 50 and actually knowing what the hell I'm doing on this. Because there is a part of me
I don't think anything's going to change. This right here is perfect.
Right, yeah.
This feral energy, this chaotic... This vibe is what I live for.
Maybe then I'll bring my feral as well, because I feel a little bit like I'm not bringing quite as much.
Maybe you just need to be more exhausted.
So yeah, no,
spend more time
I don't.
with my son.
No, I don't, because actually I practice what I preach.
I have no control over the 3-year-old.
No, you don't. You do not at all.
I really don't have any control over my 3-year-old.
Coming back to
the point
we were saying, because actually where we started with this was about how people speak to you, and the fact that actually the way that you speak to yourself is more genuinely often more cruel. And then we were talking a little bit about self-compassion and how that changed for you, because so self-compassion for me, it's interesting. So I think people will be aware that if they've listened to the podcast that I do leadership stuff, and often when you talk to people about self-compassion, it's really interesting because the word fluffy comes up. Generally, it comes up when you talk about empathy and understanding, which is fascinating. People think it's fluffy. Actually, I would tell you that it is the core of being human and relationships. And that is so important.
I would very much like to make a distinguishment right now between the terms fluffy and fluff as well, right? Because so I've moved away from the word fluff in my content, because I know that for you it's people call soft skills fluffy.
Yeah.
I call waffle fluff. And that's been a thing before. I've been like, I don't like fluff, and you've been like, what do you mean? And it's because there's two different things. So I think people who beat around the bush, I think that's my version of fluff. So when I call it fluff, that's what it is. What you're talking about is people who call, I hate that they're called soft skills as well, right? Because they're just human skills.
Human skills. I think we should choose.
Let's call them human
skills. From this moment on, we're going to talk about human skills.
Empathy, compassion.
And more.
Kindness.
Because kindness isn't niceness. But that's another conversation.
But self-compassion. It's interesting because for me, the first time we talked about it, I hope that somebody is watching this on camera so they can see the faces I pull when we have these conversations.
And mine.
Because self-compassion, the first time that you said it to me, God, it made me gave me the ick. Because it was like, ugh, victim. I'm not a victim. I don't need self-compassion. I can do anything.
Yeah, because it's... And there's a really interesting question that I think I posed to you about how do you see it, like self-compassion, and I've learnt a lot. So I'm gonna name people that are the ones, and Dr. Kristen Neff,
Hero.
is absolutely incredible.
If you ever listen to this, we love you.
Yeah, I've learnt a lot from her about self-compassion, and you know, that whole thing about actually a lot of people see it as a weakness if I'm going to be kind to myself. Like I'm letting myself off the hook and I'm not being, you know, it'll mean that I don't move out of this place that I am where they're very, well, Lauren, you're living proof. The very opposite is true. And on that note, just to point out, because more than one person will mention to me about their victim and how they hate this whole pity party and all of that.
Yeah.
And I would say that often, my experience of that for myself and also for other people is often that when we get stuck in the victim and it becomes, because it's the extreme, is that we are not able to be compassionate and kind to ourselves, that actually our inner critic is hugely cruel to us.
Yeah.
So we do not feel it's all right to be sad for ourselves or give ourselves some care and some love. All of these things are connected. All of these things that we talk about are connected. Yeah. Like they're not isolation.
It's interesting because after the self-compassion work that we've done, for me, so that original thought I had where I was like, yeah, such a victim. Yeah, what a victim. Doesn't come up for me anymore. I'm just aware that was what it was before. And like I still have that because we still know that my victim's a real problem for me. I'll work on it, okay? Okay.
That was your son then.
I know. But it's getting better because there is a part of me now that like, so do you know what it is? Having a little boy and now seeing how I want to parent it's like helping me reparent myself like, in a way as well, because like, you know, I have to ask myself, like, how would I respond to him in this situation? So if he was in this situation and he was really sad, would I say to him what I say to myself? I'm like, this is pathetic. You shouldn't be sad about that. You should be grateful. But like, of course I wouldn't. I'd get down on his level and I'd be like, oh, buddy, sounds like you're really sad, mate. I'd be really sad if that happened too. Like anybody who'd been through that would find that really sad. What do you need? What do you need? You need a cuddle? Probably not. Might be a bag of popcorn, but whatever.
That's
child-friendly popcorn. I don't give my 3-year-old real popcorn.
That's the bit, though, isn't it? That actually we're kind of missing the point when we think it's fluffy, because, you know, if we come back to, I'm going to come back to my favourite topic, which is the nervous system, because it's the core truth. This is the right at the centre. Is that this whole thing about being able to regulate, and you can't regulate without co-regulation, and co-regulation is being in the relationships with other people, and you know those people that you feel safe with, that actually it's all right to express who you are and be authentic and have the emotions, and you know the people that you don't feel safe with,
like when you pick your kid up from nursery or preschool or whatever and they see you and they cry, and it's not because they've had a horrible day or anything, like it might be, but it's generally not. Arlo did that this week, but it was because he had been holding in all day and then he saw Dave at the door and he just got so overwhelmed with this safety of, and it's great, right? There's something really privileged for me in knowing that my husband's an equally safe space for Arlo that as I am. You know, I think that's beautiful. But it's that, isn't it? It's like, you're a big one for me, where I was like, sometimes I'll be holding this stuff in and I walk in your house and I just see you and I'm like, Mom! And then it all just comes out, and it is that safety of being like, actually I don't have to hold this in here.
Yeah, and you know that I'm not gonna invalidate
shame.
It,
it'll generally come with a hug.
Yeah, I'll listen and we'll, that sounds really tough, or you know, and then we talk about it. And I think that
there might be a reframe or something after, but actually it's the validation in the moment.
And I think that's the bit, isn't it, that actually one of the things that I've noticed that you are so much working on and getting better at is actually doing that for yourself as well, because you know, I think we've always had a really good relationship, and I also know, and I've said this before on a podcast, there were definitely mistakes that I made, and there were things that I brought from, you know, previous generations, that in the way that I worked, that I've worked on, that I am working on, and also I
had a friend once who was like, "What's it like to have a mum who actually works on it?" And I was like, "What do you mean?" And she's like if I told my mum, if I called my mum out on what she said, like, and I think we just had a conversation about something, and I'd been like, oh, when we were kids, this is what happened. And it was in front of one of my friends. And you were like, oh my God, that must have been horrible. I'm really sorry for that. Like, this is where that came from for me. And I was like, I totally get that. And it was this really even conversation. Then you went home and she was like, what the fuck? She was like...
Just so everybody
what?
knows, I didn't know this.
She was like, what is it like to have a mother that apologises? And I was like, what do you mean? She was like, if I said that to my mum, she'd be like, I'm such a terrible mother. I just could do nothing right, can I? I just gave my life to my children. And I was like, oh yeah, it's quite nice.
Ish.
Soz. I know it is. But it's that like, I think our relationship, there's a real privilege in being part of a mother-daughter relationship where it's like, I don't, like, we get to have these conversations. And we get to both take responsibility, and I'm like, oh no, I can see that I was a twat when I was that age.
Yeah.
Or whatever, you know.
Yeah, I think that's been really important to me. Because and equally because I never got that chance to do that myself.
Yeah.
And I would have liked to have done that. And also because, I realised a lot of things. I think going and doing psychology at 16 was a massive thing for me. And then becoming a mum and then going and doing the counselling and doing the degree for me was life-changing because I began to accept so much more about myself. Actually begin to like myself and aspects of myself. That's what I've continued to work on. And what I wanted to do was that for you guys. And, to realise that, and just coming back to the self-compassion thing, because I vividly remember, and this story, I vividly remember being in my counselling training and it really hitting me that the way that I'd parented.
I know this story is to me.
And I've shared it to a lot of. I've shared it with a number of people, but this moment that I had, and I'm sat in front of my tutor, John, who was John. If you ever listen to this, you were brilliant. You, Jill, the whole
I'd
team,
love it if it
Margaret,
came full circle.
yeah, everybody were absolutely incredible. And I realised where you guys possibly were and I burst into tears.
Yeah, that kind of realisation of like, what have I done to my kids?
Yeah, that's what it felt like in that moment. And then, sobbing as John's trying to get my attention because obviously I'm in the middle of class. And then he just, it's funny because when I think of self-compassion now, I think he taught me self-compassion in that moment, and I don't know that I realised it.
Yeah.
Because what he was able to do was ask me what had happened, and I described to him about, the fact that there were certain things we were talking about, and I'd realised that I'd not, now in my own eyes, I wanted to be a different mother, and I wish I could go back and I could change things, because what I actually said was, oh my God, my kids are going to need therapy for the rest of their lives.
I mean, we are, but that's because everybody needs therapy.
Yeah.
It's not your fault.
But then,
everybody should be in therapy.
Then that was the moment for me when, and what he did was so beautiful, because he just said to me, Jacqueline, did you do any of that with the knowledge that you've got now? Yeah. And I just went, well, no, because I've just learned it all now. And he went, then you did a good enough job with what you had. And, yes, there may be some apologies that you need to make along the way, and there'll be some work that needs to happen. And that now can be different because, now with that knowledge that you've got, now it's about acting on it. He said, and then it was the best moment ever. He went, because acting on it is how you develop wisdom. And he said, and here's the thing, once you've got that, you've got the knowledge, and now you start to put the wisdom in place. If you don't do something about it, it's neglect.
It's neglect.
And then he turned away, and I just remember thinking, oh, okay.
It wasn't neglect because you didn't know it, but now you do know it.
It is neglect. And
so
I was
do
like,
better.
All right, okay.
Know better, do better.
So self-compassion, and just in case anyone's listening, the best way I ever heard it and the way that I describe it, 3 elements to self-compassion.
I was literally going to say I want to give them that before we finish.
The first bit is about mindfulness. And mindfulness is just tuning in to you. It's kind of getting a sense, isn't it, of what you're feeling, what you're experiencing in that moment. So for you...
Well, it's interesting actually, because what I said a little bit earlier, what I said I'd say to Arlo, actually went through the 3 stages. So they sound really big. I'm going to let you give the 3, and then I'm going to use that example to show where they are, if that's okay. So you go with the 3. So we've got mindfulness first.
Yeah. So
tuning
in. So what am I feeling?
Just say what you feel.
Yeah. What am I
feel
experiencing?
this.
What's happening?
I'm finding this
in
hard
that moment.
or whatever.
Yep. So you do that. The second is common humanity. And it's really important it's done in a particular way, because it's common humanity, where what we do is we realise that there will be other people like us who have done this and are having the same experience and feeling the same thing.
Yeah, there are two different ways to say this, and one of them is not self-compassion, because the first time we talked about this, I really struggled with it, actually. So the common humanity is the concept of other people feel the same way I do, right? But it's not other people deal with this too, so I should be fine. It's not the way to do it.
I guess can I add a little bit, which is often what can happen is we think, well, other people have got it worse than me.
So it's not that.
It's not that. It's literally
anyone else in this experience who had dealt with what I'm dealing with right now, who was going through what I'm going through, and there will be, would feel the same
or
way.
would have acted in the same way.
Yeah,
because
whatever that compassion's around.
Or would have thought in the same way.
Yeah.
It's this process of recognising it's not just me. And the reason why that is important is because if we think it's just us, the shame that can often come with that is, and shame is isolating.
Because then you're the problem.
Yeah, thank you, Brené Brown.
Yeah,
incredible shame researcher.
If you ever hear
absolutely amazing. And has got the best TED talk on shame and guilt, just so you know. And literally, it's this whole thing about then, and what happens with shame is, I turn this inwards. I believe I am the problem. So, it's not I did something wrong. Shame is I am something wrong. And that's where, I'm not enough.
Yeah.
That's shame. And actually, this is where if I sit with that and I have those kind of feelings, I realise, you know what, I'm not the only person that's going to be experiencing this. It isn't just going to be me. And what that does is that it allows the shame to dissipate and just ease.
Yeah.
Which means then the third part is when now. And I love this, because the first time I heard it, actually, Dr. Kristen Neff describes it as fierce self-compassion. And this is where the third part is the kindness.
That was the first ever giveaway we did. We gave away the book.
And it's the acting on it. It's acting on this kindness, because it's realising, isn't it? You bring this like mama bear energy for yourself that means I give myself this kindness, that it's all right to, be flawed. It's all right to, can I just say this? It's all right to be human. And messy and emotional and make mistakes. And the more that we can do that and love each other for it, because if I can't love myself for it, I will tell you now, you will not be able to love somebody else for it. Or it'll be harder. So beginning with that is really key. So this kindness for myself, because actually kindness then allows me to act in a different way.
Yeah.
So it's mindfulness, common humanity, kindness.
Yeah, so to bring that to what I'd said to Arlo, because it's such a simple thing to do. So if he'd kicked off or whatever, or he was dead sad, got down on his level, and I said, I see you feeling really sad, buddy. That's the first one. That's your mindfulness. I see you feeling really sad. So you just do this for yourself. I see you feeling really sad, buddy. I'd be sad if that happened too. Common humanity. And he's only 3, so he can't do this for himself, so we're teaching him how to do it.
You are.
And then I go, what do you need right now, buddy? Do you need a cuddle, or what do you need? Should we go for a walk? Shall we throw some pillows at the wall? Should we tell Daddy he's stinky? What's going to make you feel better? But it's that naturally is the flow of those 3 things, and we find it quite easy, I think, or some of us do, to give that to kids. But actually, and then we feel like we shouldn't have it ourselves. But one of the things for me is, let's say I go on a night out and I've had too much to drink, and then the next day you get a bit of beer fear, and I think a lot of people will probably relate to that. And it's that shame spiral of like, well, I shouldn't have drank so much, I'm a terrible person, and all that kind of thing. And actually, if you just sit back and you go, I feel really ashamed of the way I behaved and the amount I drank, I feel really disappointed.
Yeah.
I wanted to do better. I acknowledge this feeling in my body where I feel really deflated. And then you go, I am not the only person in the world who drinks, probably uses it to avoid feelings. Doesn't mean that it's okay, but I recognise that's what I did. And that's, it's a common humanity of that. And then you go, what do I need? Right, okay, well, today I need Fanta, a shower, probably,
it's okay
and a cuddle.
It's okay to have done this. It's
that happened. These are the things I need.
Yeah, and this is
and
what
actually,
I need.
That probably means that the next time I go out drinking, it'll be easier for me to turn around and go, actually, I don't want another drink, I want to go home. Than if I'd shamed myself, because what would have happened is I'd have put it in a little box and pretended it didn't exist. So that the next time round that came that I then started drinking, it then you go into the same spiral. So we don't realise that actually, I think there's this big stigmatism around self-compassion, that self-compassion is going to make us weak, that it's going to make us slovenly. Is that the word?
Slovenly, yeah.
Or less hardworking or whatever. But actually, self-compassion gives us the ability to come back stronger the next time.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's the...
Because you can't shame yourself out of a habit.
No! Yeah, I mean,
there's no way. What you can do, though, show yourself compassion and then give yourself a little bit of love. And
this works with everything.
Of course
with
it works
food,
with everything.
with exercise, with your family, with the way that you behave. Like, all of it works. But that's, self-compassion. How interesting that this conversation came from, what's your worst boss story? Lol. But I think that's probably a good time to wrap.
That was Lauren looking at her watch.
I did. And say, so we would, I guess there's two things actually that I would like to know from the listeners. One, I still want your tea, because I know that Mum said that she's being all nice about it, but I just love gossip. Tell us about your worst bosses, but also self-compassion is a skill. Takes a bit of time, I think, to learn how to do it. And you'll notice the more and more you try, I think. But like, where could you give yourself self-compassion this week? Let's say.
I'd love to know your thoughts on self-compassion.
Yeah.
Is it something that you've ever considered before? Is it something that you practice?
What feelings came up for you when we talked about it? Did you get like?
Do you recognize? Do you resonate with anything or recognize any of the stuff that we're saying? And actually, in terms of, was it helpful to hear the three parts?
Yeah, we want to know.
I guess is the bigger thing.
Tell us, and if you practice it,
tell us how it goes. We definitely want to know.
Tell us how it goes. We've got we do have a freebie. I couldn't tell you what it is, couldn't tell you what it's called, couldn't tell you if we've got an automation set up for it, but there is a freebie somewhere about self-compassion. And no, go on our social media and we'll talk about it.
Actually, if you ask us, we can send you the link. So there is an assessment that you can do.
Yeah.
And
it's a Kristen Neff one, isn't it?
Kristen Neff's one.
Yeah, there you go. It's not ours.
Yeah, it's not ours.
We'll send you a link to Kristen. She's brilliant. Do you know she's like the only newsletter I've not unsubscribed from? Anyway, we won't go down that route. Thank you for joining us.
Yeah.
On our little chat about self-compassion. One day, I was going to say one day my stomach won't be making noises in the background, but it will.
I have heard Lauren's stomach all the way through. And I would just like to thank you for being with us as we go down leafy lanes and then bring each other back and talk about the things that really matter to us. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So, see you next time.
Take care. Bye.
Arrivederci.